Claire adjusted the strap of her dress nervously as she stood near the entrance of the hall. The room was buzzing with voices, laughter, and clinking glasses, and she could feel her heart beating faster with every step she took. Family gatherings had never been easy for her, and tonight felt even heavier. Her younger sister, Lily, was hosting this engagement celebration for her fiancé, Ethan, and Claire knew that Lily had always enjoyed being the center of attention. Claire had learned, over years of subtle jabs and jokes, that her sister found ways to embarrass her without seeming cruel. And tonight, with so many people watching, Claire could feel the tension building already. As she glanced around the room, Claire spotted familiar faces, neighbors, cousins she barely remembered, and old family friends. Everyone seemed cheerful, but Claire felt like a stranger observing from the edges. She smoothed her hair, took a deep breath, and tried to steady herself. She didn't want to be the shy, awkward one again, the one who always shrank when Lily cracked her jokes. Yet, even as she tried to prepare, she knew that Lily would find some way to make her squirm. It had happened countless times before. A teasing comment about her job, her looks, or even her hobbies, Lily had a way of saying things that made everyone laugh at Claire's expense. Claire forced a small smile as she moved further into the room. The lights were soft, golden, and warm, but they did little to calm her nerves. She watched Lily from across the hall, noticing the confident way her sister greeted guests. Lily's laughter was bright and effortless, her voice commanding attention without effort. Claire sighed quietly. She had always admired Lily's charm in the past, but tonight, it only reminded her of how different they were. Where Lily thrived in public attention, Claire often felt invisible until someone's words made her painfully obvious. Claire's mind drifted back to earlier moments in her life, school events, family dinners, even casual outings where Lily had subtly mocked her. Sometimes it had been playful, other times crueler, but it always left Claire feeling exposed. She hated admitting that these moments still haunted her, but the anxiety in her chest told her the truth. She had learned to brace herself, to laugh along sometimes, and to hide her discomfort behind polite smiles. Yet tonight, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something different, something that would make her heart race faster than ever. Guests continued to stream in, and Claire noticed the little details that always heightened her nervousness. The way Lily's friends immediately flocked to her sister, whispering and giggling, and the way people's eyes seemed to follow Lily's every move. Claire tried to focus on anything else, on the flowers arranged neatly along the tables, the soft music playing in the background, but her gaze always returned to Lily. She felt a mix of admiration and frustration. She wished she could be as confident, as effortlessly graceful, but at the same time, she braced herself for the inevitable embarrassment that seemed to follow her sister wherever she went. And then, Lily spotted Claire. Her smile widened, not with warmth, but with that hint of mischief Claire knew too well. She was coming toward Claire, all charm and confidence, with Ethan following a few steps behind. Claire's stomach tightened. She could almost hear the words forming in Lily's head, the teasing remarks that would be aimed at her as soon as she got close. Claire straightened her posture, tried to meet her sister's gaze with calm, but her pulse was racing, and a small, involuntary tremor ran through her hand. She hated feeling so small, so vulnerable, in a room full of people who barely noticed her except when her sister pointed her out. Lily stopped in front of her, leaning slightly, her voice soft but carrying that familiar bite. Claire's heart sank as she sensed the attention shifting toward her. Conversations paused subtly, people glancing at them with curiosity. Claire's mind raced, thinking of the hundreds of ways this could go wrong. She had rehearsed in her head how she might respond, how she might hold her ground, but nothing felt enough. Her thoughts collided with a fear she hadn't felt in years, a fear that tonight, in front of everyone, she might be reduced to the quiet, embarrassed version of herself that Lily always seemed to enjoy revealing. Ethan, Lily's fiancé, stood behind her sister, observing with polite interest. Claire noticed the way he studied her, though she couldn't yet read his expression. She tried to take a deep breath, to remind herself that she had handled worse moments in the past, yet the tension in her chest refused to ease. Every laugh from the guests felt like it was directed at her, every glance a potential judgment. Claire's fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. She wished she could disappear, or at least shrink into herself just enough to avoid Lily's teasing words. As Lily began to speak, her words soft but sharp, the room seemed to lean in. Claire felt the weight of every eye, every expectant pause. She realized, in that moment, that tonight could change something not just in the way others saw her, but in the way she saw herself. Despite the fear, a small spark of determination flickered inside her. Maybe this time, she could face the humiliation without crumbling. Maybe tonight, she could show that she was more than just the target of her sister's jokes. Claire felt her stomach twist as Lily's voice cut through the soft hum of conversation. It was that familiar tone, playful, teasing, but edged with sharpness. "Oh, Claire," Lily said, leaning slightly closer, her smile wide, "I didn't know you'd actually make it tonight. I thought you'd be too busy, or scared of all these people." A ripple of laughter passed through the guests nearby. Claire felt her cheeks flush, a hot wave of embarrassment creeping up her neck. She tried to force a smile, but it felt brittle, like it might shatter at any moment. Her fingers curled around the strap of her purse so tightly it hurt. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and vanish from the room, yet she had nowhere to go. All eyes, even those she didn't know, seemed to be following the exchange. Claire's mind raced. She knew Lily had said this with a hint of humor, but there was no missing the underlying jab. It was a public spotlight, and once again, Lily had managed to pull her into it. Claire hated that familiar sinking feeling in her chest, the one that told her everyone was silently judging her. She remembered all the times this had happened before: family dinners, birthdays, casual outings, moments where a simple sentence from Lily made her the target of laughter and whispers. Ethan, Lily's fiancé, stood a step behind her, observing with polite interest. Claire's eyes flicked to him briefly, searching for some sign of reassurance. But his expression was neutral, unreadable, and that only made her more nervous. She wanted him to intervene, to step in and stop Lily before the embarrassment became unbearable, but she had learned long ago not to expect rescue from anyone. Tonight, she realized, she had to navigate this storm herself. Lily's grin widened, her voice dropping just enough to catch everyone's attention. "I mean, Claire's always so serious, isn't she? I half expect her to judge everyone around her." "Oh wait," she said, leaning back with exaggerated surprise, "maybe she does." A burst of laughter followed. Some of it awkward, some genuinely amused. Claire's heart pounded. She could feel the heat in her face, her hands trembling slightly. Her mind screamed at her to respond, to defend herself, but the words felt trapped behind a wall of shame. She wished she could be invisible, to melt into the background until this moment passed, but the room seemed to close in around her, every eye fixed, every laugh piercing. Then came the sharpest twist. Ethan's eyes widened, his mouth opening slightly as if he hadn't expected what he just heard. "Wait, you're the judge?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. The room went quiet, a sudden shift that made Claire's ears ring. She blinked, startled by the unexpected reaction. Everyone turned to look at her, their laughter fading into murmurs of curiosity. Claire felt a strange mix of relief and tension. Relief that the focus was no longer just on humiliation, tension because she now had to respond, and everyone was watching. Claire took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Yes," she said quietly at first, then a bit louder as she noticed the guests leaning in. "I'm a judge for the local art competition. I've been doing it for 3 years." The surprise on the faces around her was palpable. Some guests nodded, clearly impressed. Others whispered among themselves, and Claire could feel the room shifting in its energy. Lily's grin faltered, her confident posture wobbling slightly. She hadn't expected this, hadn't anticipated that Claire had a respected role outside the family drama she always seemed to create. Ethan's expression softened, replaced by a mixture of admiration and genuine interest. "I had no idea," he admitted, his tone sincere. Claire felt a small thrill of validation, a subtle warmth replacing the cold fear that had gripped her moments ago. For the first time tonight, someone's gaze felt supportive rather than judgmental. But Lily, ever the performer, tried to recover. "Well, that's impressive, I guess," she said, attempting a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Claire noticed the slight tremor in her voice, the way her sister's confidence had taken a small, unexpected hit. For a brief moment, Claire felt a shift, a quiet triumph blooming inside her chest. She had been humiliated in front of everyone, yes, but now, the tables had started to turn. Claire straightened, feeling a wave of determination. She realized that tonight didn't have to end with her feeling small. She could stand her ground, show her worth, and perhaps even teach Lily that teasing her publicly wasn't as harmless as it seemed. The room was still focused on her, still buzzing with tension, but instead of shrinking, Claire found herself meeting gazes with a steadier, calmer presence. Even as Lily's words lingered in the air, Claire felt something shift inside her. The fear that had gripped her from the moment she walked in was still there, yes, but it was tempered now with a growing sense of strength. She knew the coming moments would be crucial. How she responded, how she carried herself, would set the tone for the rest of the night. And for the first time, Claire felt ready to face it, ready to show that she was more than just the target of her sister's teasing. The room seemed to hold its breath after Ethan's words. "Wait, you're the judge." Claire could hear the faint echo of his surprise, and it was like a sudden wave breaking over the tension she had carried for so long. All at once, the laughter that had followed Lily's teasing moments ago dissolved into murmurs of curiosity. Every eye in the room was now on Claire, and she felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation. She hadn't expected this. No one had. Claire's chest tightened as she tried to steady herself. She wasn't used to being the center of attention in this way, not with all these people watching, and certainly not because someone had finally recognized her achievements. It was strange, surreal, almost like stepping into a spotlight she had avoided her whole life. Her mind raced with thoughts. What should she say? How should she react? She could feel the old, familiar fear creeping in, but beneath it was a spark she hadn't felt in years, a quiet, burning confidence that maybe, just maybe, she could stand tall. Ethan stepped forward slightly, his gaze fixed on Claire. There was genuine surprise in his eyes, mixed with something else, admiration, maybe even respect. "I had no idea," he said again, slower this time, as if savoring the revelation. Claire felt her stomach tighten, a small thrill running through her. It was a strange feeling, being recognized not for who her sister said she was, but for who she really was. Lily's smile, once bright and mischievous, faltered. Claire noticed the subtle change immediately, the tilt of her sister's head, the brief flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Lily had expected her usual reaction, embarrassment, a forced laugh, perhaps a small blush that would give her sister and the guests a reason to chuckle. But Claire's silence, her composed expression, had shifted the power of the moment. Claire finally spoke, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the murmurs around them. "Yes," she said. "I'm the judge for the local art competition. I've been doing it for 3 years now. It's a position I take seriously." The words felt strange on her tongue, but liberating at the same time. She had always been careful to downplay her achievements around Lily, fearing her sister's teasing, but tonight she decided she wouldn't hide anymore. The room reacted instantly. Whispers spread as people began to nod in recognition. Some faces showed surprise, others showed genuine interest. Claire felt her confidence grow with every passing second. Ethan's reaction deepened. His eyebrows lifted, and he took a step closer, as if trying to understand the depth of Claire's role. "Wow," he said, almost to himself. "That's really impressive." The sincerity in his voice made Claire's heart lift. She could feel the tension in her shoulders start to ease, replaced by a quiet pride she hadn't felt before. Meanwhile, Lily tried to regain control of the moment. "Well, that's quite something, Claire," she said, forcing a laugh that sounded tight and unnatural. Claire could see the faint flush creeping onto her sister's cheeks. Lily had always relied on charm and wit to dominate social situations, but now, the tables had subtly turned. Claire realized with a small thrill that her sister had underestimated her not just tonight, but perhaps all along. Claire straightened her back, taking a deep breath. She had felt humiliated, nervous, and vulnerable just moments ago, but now she sensed the shift in power. For the first time in years, she was being seen for her abilities, not her shyness or her sister's jokes. She could feel the old fear trying to sneak back, whispering that she should shrink, that this attention might be dangerous, but she pushed it aside. Tonight, she was determined to hold her ground. Ethan's eyes flicked between Claire and Lily, and Claire sensed something unspoken passing between them. He seemed impressed, perhaps even a little shocked, by the contrast between Claire's quiet confidence and Lily's usual flamboyance. For a brief moment, Claire felt a surge of triumph. She wasn't just surviving this encounter, she was claiming it, reshaping it in her own favor. The guests, too, began to sense the change. The subtle shift in energy didn't go unnoticed. Conversations resumed, but now there was an undertone of respect, a new curiosity about Claire that hadn't existed before. She could feel it in the way people glanced at her, the way their expressions softened, and even in the quiet nods of approval from those she barely knew. Lily's expression hardened slightly, though Claire couldn't decide if it was embarrassment, frustration, or a mixture of both. Her sister's teasing had always been effortless, almost natural, but now Claire saw the cracks in that armor. It was intoxicating, in a way she hadn't expected, proof that her presence, her voice, and her accomplishments mattered. For a brief, suspended moment, Claire felt a surge of emotion that was difficult to name. Relief, pride, validation, all of it wrapped together in a single pulse. She had been humiliated, yes, but that humiliation had led to something unexpected, recognition, acknowledgement, and a subtle sense of empowerment. And in that moment, Claire understood something important. Sometimes, the world's surprise could be a weapon, not against her, but in her favor. As she looked around the room, meeting eyes that now saw her differently, Claire felt a quiet, simmering determination. She would not allow herself to be humiliated again. Not here, not tonight, and certainly not by her sister. And though the evening was far from over, she knew that a subtle victory had already been won, one that would shape the moments to come in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Claire could feel the room shifting around her, like the air itself had changed. The laughter that had once pointed directly at her was now tinged with curiosity and respect. She took a slow breath, letting the warmth of recognition seep into her chest. It was a strange feeling, one she hadn't allowed herself to enjoy before. But tonight, after years of enduring Lily's teasing, it felt almost intoxicating. She met Ethan's gaze again, and this time there was no surprise, only genuine admiration. "I had no idea," he said softly, almost as if he were speaking to himself. "That's incredible, Claire." His tone carried weight, not just polite acknowledgement. Claire felt a small smile tug at her lips. For the first time tonight, she felt truly seen, not as Lily's sister, not as the shy one who always faded into the background, but as her own person, capable and respected. Lily, on the other hand, looked unsettled. Her usual confidence seemed to falter, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. Claire noticed the way her sister's fingers fiddled with the edge of her dress, the way her voice, when she tried to respond, lacked its usual warmth and humor. For years, Lily had used charm and jokes to dominate social situations, but now the dynamics had shifted. Claire could see it clearly. Lily hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected Claire to be taken seriously, to command attention in a way that couldn't be laughed off. Claire straightened her posture, feeling a quiet determination rise within her. She had been humiliated, yes, but she was no longer shrinking in response. Instead, she was standing tall, letting her presence speak for itself. "Yes," she said again, her voice stronger now, carrying naturally across the small cluster of guests nearby. "I've been judging local art competitions for a few years. It's something I take very seriously, and I enjoy it." The guests responded immediately. Nods of recognition, murmurs of approval, and even a few whispered compliments rippled through the room. Claire could feel the shift solidifying. What had begun as embarrassment was slowly turning into quiet triumph. People were no longer laughing at her, they were listening. They were paying attention. And, most importantly, Claire felt her own confidence growing with every passing second. Ethan took a careful step closer, his attention fully on her now. "That's really impressive," he said again, this time with unmistakable sincerity. "I had no idea you were so accomplished. I'm glad you're here tonight." His words felt like a shield, protecting her from the last lingering sting of humiliation. Claire's heart fluttered, not in fear, but in relief and pride. She realized that she didn't need anyone else to validate her. Her achievements and her composure were validation enough. But Ethan's recognition made the moment feel richer, warmer, and somehow more powerful. Lily tried to respond, her voice higher than usual, attempting her familiar teasing tone. "Well, I guess that's quite something, Claire," she said, laughing nervously. But the sound didn't carry the authority it usually did. The people around them were no longer focused on Lily, their attention had shifted entirely to Claire. For the first time, Claire felt a subtle, quiet triumph. She wasn't just enduring her sister's teasing, she was changing the story. She was reclaiming the moment. A small smile spread across Claire's face. She had always been careful, cautious, trying not to draw attention to herself, trying not to give Lily any reason to mock her. But tonight was different. Tonight, she realized that she could face humiliation and still emerge with her dignity intact. She could meet teasing with calm, answer doubt with confidence, and reveal her true self in a way that no one could dismiss. The guests seemed to sense the change, too. Conversations resumed, but the tone was different, curious, respectful, and attentive. Claire noticed nods of approval from people she had barely spoken to before. Even the murmurs that passed between guests carried a subtle awe. It was as if the room itself had acknowledged her presence in a new way. Lily's expression remained tense. Claire could see the tiny crack in her sister's armor, the momentary hesitation that came from realizing that her usual methods of control didn't work on Claire anymore. For years, Lily had been the dominant personality in every room, the one everyone listened to, the one everyone laughed with. But now, Claire felt a sense of quiet victory. She wasn't trying to embarrass Lily in return, she didn't need to, but she could see clearly that she had shifted the balance, at least in this moment. Claire took another deep breath, letting the tension ease from her shoulders. She felt something inside her that had been dormant for years, a sense of strength, calm, and quiet empowerment. She had faced her sister's public humiliation, and instead of crumbling, she had stood firm. She had turned the moment into proof of her worth, and the realization made her chest swell with a mix of pride and relief. And as she glanced at Ethan again, seeing his respectful expression, she realized something else. Moments like this didn't just reveal who she was, they changed the way others saw her, too. Claire had been humiliated, yes, but now she was rising above it, claiming her space, and showing the world that she was more than anyone's joke or misunderstanding. Lily's face had changed entirely. The confident, teasing smile that had once dominated every gathering was now replaced by something quieter, an almost imperceptible mix of surprise, confusion, and perhaps even guilt. Claire noticed it immediately. For years, Lily had been the one in control, the one who could make a room laugh at her sister's expense without a second thought. But now, the balance had shifted. Claire could feel it, subtle but undeniable, like a current running through the room. Claire tried not to let herself savor the moment too much, she didn't want to gloat. But she couldn't ignore the small thrill that ran through her chest. She had been humiliated publicly, teased in front of everyone she knew, yet here she was standing tall, composed, and respected. Even Lily's attempts to regain the upper hand had faltered. Every nervous laugh, every hesitant word from her sister only reminded Claire of how far she had come. Ethan, still watching closely, seemed genuinely impressed. He stepped forward, his eyes calm but full of recognition. "Claire," he said softly, "I honestly didn't know. I can see why people respect you so much." His words carried weight, and Claire felt a warmth spread through her. It wasn't just about being acknowledged, it was about being seen for who she truly was, someone more than her sister's shadow. Lily tried to speak again, a forced laugh escaping her lips. "Well, I guess that's good to know," she said, the confidence in her voice faltering. She glanced at Ethan, as if seeking reassurance that she hadn't entirely lost the moment, but he was still focused on Claire. That's when Claire realized something profound. She didn't need anyone's approval anymore. She had her own voice, her own worth, and for the first time, it was undeniable. A few guests murmured among themselves, nodding subtly, whispering compliments that carried through the room. Claire could sense their curiosity, their newfound respect. Even people she barely knew were glancing at her differently, with a quiet awe that warmed her chest. She realized that the embarrassment she had felt minutes ago had given way to validation she hadn't expected, and it was intoxicating in the gentlest way. Lily shifted uncomfortably, noticing the subtle change in the room's energy. Claire saw her sister's fingers fidget with the hem of her dress, the small tremor betraying her unease. For years, Lily had relied on charm, wit, and teasing to control social situations. But now, Claire's calm composure, coupled with the acknowledgement of her role as a respected judge, had disrupted Lily's familiar dynamic. Claire felt a quiet satisfaction in witnessing this shift, not revenge, just acknowledgement that she had risen above. Claire took a measured breath, feeling a sense of calm and control that had eluded her for years. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice carrying naturally across the small cluster of guests nearby. "It means a lot to be recognized, especially when it's unexpected." She kept her tone gentle but firm, letting her words carry the weight of her experience without arrogance. Ethan smiled warmly, clearly impressed. "You deserve every bit of respect, Claire," he said. His sincerity was evident, and Claire felt her chest swell with quiet pride. It wasn't about proving Lily wrong, it was about showing herself what she was capable of, even when under pressure and scrutiny. Lily's eyes flicked between Claire and Ethan, her usual confidence visibly shaken. Claire didn't mock her, she didn't need to. The moment itself spoke louder than any words could. For the first time, Lily seemed to realize that her sister was not someone to be casually dismissed or teased. Claire could feel the unspoken acknowledgement passing between them, a subtle shift in their long-standing dynamic. The room began to return to its usual hum, but the tone had changed entirely. Conversations resumed, yet the undercurrent of respect for Claire remained. People whispered, nodded, and glanced toward her, all carrying the quiet acknowledgement of her strength and capability. She noticed subtle glances from family members she hadn't expected to notice, their expressions now tinged with approval rather than casual indifference. Claire felt a gentle smile tug at her lips. She had been humiliated, yes, but that humiliation had been transformed into something empowering. She realized that public moments, even painful ones, could become opportunities to reveal strength, to assert dignity, and to gain recognition. She had not only survived Lily's teasing but had turned it into a moment of subtle triumph. Lily's face softened slightly, a small acknowledgement passing between the sisters. It wasn't a full apology, nor was it a complete acceptance, but it was enough for Claire to see that something had shifted. For the first time, she felt a quiet respect emanating from her sister, a recognition that Claire was no longer the same person who would simply blush and bow in embarrassment. As Claire glanced at Ethan again, she felt a sense of calm settle over her. The night was far from over, but the most difficult part had already passed. She had faced public humiliation, yet emerged with grace, dignity, and newfound confidence. And in that quiet victory, Claire knew one thing for certain: she would never allow herself to be diminished again, not by her sister, not by anyone. Claire stepped back slightly, taking in the room around her. The soft hum of conversations, the occasional clinking of glasses, and the quiet laughter of guests now felt different, warmer, more accepting, less threatening. The tension that had gripped her since the moment she walked in was slowly lifting, replaced by a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had faced public humiliation, stared it down, and come out stronger. And somehow, that made everything else, the teasing, the nerves, the fear of judgment, feel almost insignificant. Her gaze wandered to Lily, who stood near the edge of the room, still adjusting to the unexpected shift. Claire could see the subtle mix of emotions crossing her sister's face: surprise, uncertainty, and perhaps a hint of respect. Claire didn't feel the need to gloat or assert dominance. She simply allowed herself to feel the satisfaction of knowing she had stood her ground, not out of revenge, but because she deserved to be seen for who she truly was. Ethan, now clearly relaxed, approached Claire with a small smile. "You really handled that well," he said quietly, his tone sincere. "I can see why people respect you." Claire felt a warmth spread through her chest, not just from his words, but from the understanding that she was finally being recognized as more than just Lily's sister, the one who had always faded in the background. Claire's thoughts drifted to the long, complicated history with her sister. There had been countless moments of teasing, embarrassment, and subtle undermining. But tonight was different. Tonight, she had proven to herself and perhaps even to Lily that she could endure the spotlight, face the humiliation, and emerge with her dignity intact. The weight of years of insecurity felt lighter now, replaced with a quiet strength she hadn't realized she possessed. Lily, sensing the change, tried a small smile. It wasn't her usual confident, teasing grin, but it carried a new undertone, an acknowledgement, perhaps unspoken, that Claire had changed the dynamics between them. Claire met her sister's gaze for a brief moment, and in that exchange, she sensed a subtle shift. It was not forgiveness, nor was it a complete reconciliation, but it was recognition. Lily had seen the quiet strength that Claire had cultivated over the years, and it could no longer be dismissed. The guests continued their conversations, but the subtle undercurrent of respect for Claire remained. She noticed glances, nods, and whispers of admiration. People were no longer seeing her as shy, timid, or awkward. They were seeing her as someone who had risen above a difficult moment, someone capable and composed. The validation was quiet but powerful, and Claire felt it resonate deeply within her. As she stood there, Claire reflected on what this night had taught her. Public humiliation, once a source of fear, could become a catalyst for strength. Moments of embarrassment, she realized, did not define her, her reactions did. She had chosen to face the teasing, assert her value, and maintain her composure. And in doing so, she had reclaimed her sense of self. Ethan's presence remained a comforting reminder that acknowledgement could come from unexpected places. His respect and sincere admiration were tangible, a reinforcement of Claire's own internal validation. For the first time, she felt that recognition didn't have to come solely from family or friends who had witnessed her past struggles. It could come from her own confidence, her own sense of worth. Claire's thoughts returned briefly to Lily. There would still be challenges, moments where her sister's teasing might resurface, where the old patterns could attempt to reclaim their hold. But Claire knew she was ready. She had experienced her turning point tonight, and nothing could diminish the growth and confidence she had gained. The embarrassment that once felt overwhelming had transformed into a stepping stone, a lesson in resilience and self-assurance. Taking a deep breath, Claire allowed herself to smile fully, the tension in her shoulders easing completely. She had faced the storm, endured the laughter, and emerged not just unbroken, but stronger, wiser, and more confident than she had ever been. And in that quiet triumph, she understood something essential. True strength was not in avoiding humiliation, but in confronting it, embracing it, and proving, first and foremost to herself, that she was more than anyone's assumptions or jokes. As the evening drew on, Claire moved through the room with a new sense of ease. Conversations flowed, smiles came naturally, and she felt a quiet pride in the way she carried herself. The world no longer seemed threatening, nor did her sister's teasing feel insurmountable. She had faced the moment she had feared most and had not only survived, but flourished. And in that final reflection, Claire knew one undeniable truth: humiliation might be inevitable, but it would never define her. She was strong, she was capable, and she would always rise above, no matter who doubted her, no matter who tried to belittle her, and no matter how public the stage. Tonight had proven it.